before I could lay out and cut the angle on the end of this board, I needed to get the assembly cleaned up and squared up. So the first thing to do was to take the spacer block and put it in, bolt it into place, insert a couple of bolts here to hold this in its final position, and then make sure that the top two rails were square to the side. When this part glued up, and even when I was drilling the bolt holes here, there was a little bit of shift, and so I had some material to remove on the top edge of one of these boards to get it square with the other one. I also turned the board over and made sure that it was square in the bottom, right where the stage assembly drops in. And the only reason to mess with that is because you're going to have a wedge going across there, and you want it wedging across. You want as much surface for the underside of the rails in contact with that wedge as possible so that it has a really nice tight grip. After the tops of the rails were square with the sides, I could then lay out and get ready to cut the end of the rail assembly. So the first thing I want to do is take my bevel and make sure that it's still set to the angle we want, and it is. Then we're going to take our measurement okay, and we're going to put it on the part. All right, we are going to transfer that all the way around. I've got a reference surface here, so we'll go ahead and use it. All right, this is a pretty big cut. I'm okay with a handsaw, but if I try to cut something this size by hand, I'll end up undercutting it and making kind of a mess out of it. And I need this edge to be true and square. So what I'm going to do is take it over the bandsaw and just make it all in one cut, then come back to the bench and make sure that it's clean and square so that we can continue with the layout. Okay, we've got our big cut made, and it's a little bit out of square. It looks like the blade drifted in a bit as it was coming out the bottom, so I was probably cutting a little too fast. In this direction, it's pretty straight, so that means that I was driving it straight. We're going to plane this direction and probably across the grain as well to get this cleaned up. And so we want to make sure that we ease the edges where we're going to exit with our plane, so that way we don't blow it out. And the really critical edge is this one. This one will blow out really easily. So we're going to ease this edge here. Now this will erase the line, but this angle is not super critical. What's really critical is that it be straight and that it be square from one side to the other. The fact that it may be off by a degree or two in this direction is not really that important. So don't worry about taking your line away. We'll go this way first. You got to do a pretty big relief cut here. Okay. Do this edge. And then I'll have to use a chisel to get in here. Okay. That looks pretty good. And when I'm detailing this horse to ship it out to my customer, I'll go through and make sure all these are even and they all look consistent. But for now, as far as planing goes, we've got enough material off of there. I have to keep an eye on it as we work to make sure that it doesn't get too small, that little chamfer. Okay, so block plane is the best tool for this job, and just to make sure I'm starting on the right side. Yep, need to take more material here and less here. So we're going to work our way across. Okay, so take a look at where we've got a pretty clean surface. That almost did it. We're going to start this sequence over again. So I take one pass, 1, 2 passes, 1, 2, 3 passes, 1, 2, 3, 4 passes. And that's a systematic way to take an even amount of material off of one side or the other. Okay, so now we're square, but we've got to get these marks removed. So I'm going to change directions, and I'm just going to go straight across. But I'm skewing the plane so that the force is downhill. You may be wondering about how this block plane is set up. This is actually, for one, it's sharp. Two, it's not actually ground or honed at a really shallow angle. This thing is at 40 degrees right now. So with the 12.5 degree bed, this is actually closer to 53 degree cutting angle. And it's doing an excellent job on end grain. So don't feel like you have to have a special tool for cutting end grain. Just sharpen it. Close up the mouth, and you can get good consistency of cut. I'm going to go ahead and ease this little corner right here, because I have a feeling it's wanting to break out on me. All right, that's better, and should be just about done. Let's check our work. Okay. All right. The next thing we want to do is lay out where the dado is going to be and where the bolt holes are going to be so that we can move forward. So I'm going to set a square to the distance that I want to the face of the back leg, which is 1 7/8. Okay. That is my back face of the back leg. The leg itself is 1.5 inches thick, so I just have to add 1.5 inches from that mark. And we're good there. And the bolts go halfway between the two, so that's 3/4. Now that line, I'm going to actually just square all the way across. These two lines here, I'm going to use a knife to lay out. So And this is the only one that I'm going to lay out by hand. The other one is going to be determined by the leg itself, the part itself. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I'm matching the angle that I cut, the angle that I want. And then I am going to set my bevel gauge on this pencil line and knife the line in. We're going to do a pretty light cuts at first, and we're going to add some force as we go. And I'm going to use a square to bring that measurement across. And the bevel of the blade was in the waist, which is where I want it. So I need to make sure that I do the same thing when I bring this line across. Get the best chance of having the legs be in the same place. Now we need to mark the depth of the dado, which is 3/8. I don't know if you heard that click. One of the things I really like about these marking gauges from Hamilton is that the blade is so hard you can actually drop it into the etchings on your square to set the fence. I'm looking down the line here and I'm eyeballing where the mortise is going to start and stop on this face, and that just gives me something to guide my where to start and stop my gauge. And actually, I'll run this across both sides here. We're not looking for perfection, we just want to get pretty close. And this one is set to the knife line, so I know that it's right. This one is just done by eye. I'm sighting down this line and kind of getting the pencil in the line. I'll stop short of this one here so that I don't go too far past where I want it to be. And knife lines can be hard to see in stuff like oak and ash, so don't be afraid to make several swipes and get it deep. We need to do it on the bottom as well. You can still see the little flaky edge from when I planed this thing to width. That's your signal to stop planing. You're there. Okay, so we've got our depth of our dado marked. Got the line for our holes and the knife line for one side of the setup for the cut. We need to go ahead and drill our holes, and then when we remove the waste, we don't have to worry about if we get a little bit of blowout on the exit. We don't have to worry about any of that. We actually don't even have to exit. We can just wait for the lead screw to come through and stop there. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out those two holes. And we'll use an awl to make it easier to start in the right spot. The next step will be to set up some mirrors so that we can drill these holes by hand with a brace and bit. If you have a drill press, just drill the holes through and don't worry about it. Just make sure they're nice and square. The table is square. I've got my hand drilling set up all together. It's basically just a pair of squares and a pair of mirrors set at right angles to each other. And what that allows me to do is set up to drill my holes and sight whether I'm square in both directions. And so as long as I keep it, square parallel with my edges, I should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm basically checking back and forth moving my eye without trying not to move my head, and I keep wanting to lean the bit away from myself. It's a little awkward at first, but it gets easier. At some point, it's pretty hard to change the direction of the bit, so okay. Hit my square. No, that does not want to come back out. Let me clamp the other side down. Okay, one. Okay, here are our two exit points, and they should be 3/4 of an inch from the line. That one's off by almost 1/8. That one's better. I think that was I don't know if that was the first hole or the second. And then they should be 1 1/8 inches from the edge, and this one was, or no, 1 inch from the edge. This one's off by about 1/16. This one's the same. So it's actually pretty good. I don't do a lot of hand drilling, and I usually do it at weird angles, so it's kind of, well, they don't have to be perfect, they just have to be close to the same. You have a couple of choices if you're going to do this by hand. You could, since they both missed by about the same amount, you could move this line over on this side and kind of split the difference. You could leave it the way it is, and then when the holes come out, when the bolts come out through here, through the leg, the hole's going to be a little bit off center in the counter bore. Not a big deal, it's just a looks thing. If you shift the leg, then you're going to have a difference in the alignment here, so you're going to have to kind of choose which one bothers you the least. I wouldn't worry too much about it being a little bit off. And if you did this on a drill press and your table was square, the hole is just going to go straight through. You're not going to worry about any of this. So normally when you're drilling a through hole with a brace and bit, once the auger point comes out, you would go ahead and drill from the other side. But we're going to be cutting a dado that's 3/8 of an inch deep in this opening, and all this is going to go away anyway, so we don't really have to worry about it. So the next thing we need to do is get set up to cut this dado. And rather than saw it completely freehand, I'm going to actually clamp a batten right on this knife line, and we'll use that to guide our saw. Then we will clamp the actual part that's going in this place to the bench, or to the rail against the batten, and move the batten to the other side, pull the part off, and saw against the batten on this side, and we'll end up with a groove, a dado that's exactly the width of our part.